Communication in the workplace is obviously a critical issue. Teams that communicate well have the potential to perform at significantly higher levels. Teams that don't communicate well regularly underperform. My name's Simon Tyson. I'm the CEO of the Real Learning Experience, and today I plan to share with you some strategies to get your team communicating in a way that allows you to produce the performance you're looking for. Now, the first thing we would say about communication in the workplace is that you as the leader, you as the manager of the group, have a disproportionate impact on the way they communicate. A critical realisation for managers and for leaders is that your team is highly unlikely to communicate more effectively than you communicate. So the way you communicate with your team and about your team actually imposes a ceiling on the potential for good communication within that team. This is all about you, the leader, as a model. We believe that one of the critical roles of leaders is to be the best model they can be for their team. As a model, you impact them in two critical ways. Firstly, you show them the way things are done around here. Secondly, if you're setting a high standard, you show them how to achieve that. Now, this plays out in three critical ways when it comes to communication in the workplace. The way they communicate with you, the way they communicate with each other, and the way they communicate with the external client or customer. So let's look at each of those situations one at a time, and we'll start with the way they communicate with you. I can't tell you how many managers and leaders have told me about how frustrated they are that their people won't accept feedback from them. Yet when we examine the way the leader accepts feedback from the staff member, it's little wonder this dynamic's occurring. The way your people accept feedback from you is highly modelled on the way you take feedback from them. Now, you may feel that you're really good at accepting feedback from your team, but this happens in subtle ways. For example, what's the first thing they hear when they come to you with an idea? What's the first thing they hear when they come to you with a suggestion for doing things differently? What's your response when they suggest approaching something in a new way, a different way, or when they have a contrary opinion to yours? If, like most human beings, your natural instinct is to defend your current position, to justify the way you currently do things, to reinforce your own opinion, that's seen by the staff member as refusing to accept feedback. When they in turn need to accept feedback from you, it's little wonder that you get similar reactions from them. Now, this principle of reciprocity in communication could also be applied to respect, openness, trust. For example, if you demand that your people respect you without showing them respect as well, it's simply not going to happen. People tend to show the respect they feel they get. So let's move on to the way they work with each other. Once again, the way you treat many dynamics is played out amongst your team. For example, if you deal with conflict in a really specific way, you're likely to see that played out in your team, which of course is great if you're dealing with conflict positively and proactively. We worked with a manager recently who had a very direct, very black and white, very dry interpersonal communication style. The way they communicated with other people often felt to other people like conflict, even though that wasn't the intention of this manager. Now, while it wasn't obvious to this manager the way their own style was being perceived, it was blatantly obvious to them looking at their team that there appeared to be conflict amongst team members. Much of that conflict was based on reactions to that very same direct, black and white style that team members had acquired by observing the manager. If you expect your people to communicate with each other in specific ways, you need to start by modelling that style yourself in every interaction you have with your team. So let's look at the third situation now, and that's the way your people communicate with the external client, the external user, the external customer, whatever that means in your organisation. Now, very often, interacting with that external client requires certain skills, requires certain communication styles to be effective, and that varies from organisation to organisation. What doesn't vary is the fact that you need to model the interpersonal communication style with your people that you expect them to use with the external client. I'm going to illustrate that by talking about two organisations we've worked with recently. In the first of them, the sales manager was adamant that his people weren't listening to their clients effectively. Too often client needs were misunderstood. Too often clients returned the product they bought because it simply didn't do what they bought it to do. This manager was adamant that his people needed to improve their listening skills. The irony, when his people came to him with ideas, with problems, with solutions, with possibilities, he didn't listen to them. And we saw this played out in the interactions he had with his people while we were actually involved with the company. It's really hard to say to your people, go and be great listeners when you're working with the external client if that's not the experience they have with you. This is a classic of leader as model going slightly awry. Now, in the second organisation that we dealt with that had this issue, the internal staff needed to work with high empathy when they were talking to the external user. It was a sensitive environment they were working in, and the need for empathy was higher than many situations we've ever seen. One of the biggest challenges is the manager who ran the team dealing with the external clients was one of the most efficient people we've ever met. However, they had a really black and white approach with little room for empathy, with little room for understanding the situation his people were experiencing. They learnt empathy habits by modelling his behaviour, and the flow through was that the external client wasn't treated with the level of empathy that was required. So there you have three situations in which your own workplace communication style acts as a model for your people. It impacts the way they deal with you, the way they communicate with each other, and the way they work with the external client. If you're really serious about improving interpersonal and workplace communication in your team, take the lead. See yourself as leader as model and establish the communication standard that you expect to see amongst your people. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoy the resources we create, please make sure you subscribe to receive notifications whenever we create a new article, resource or video.